Well, good morning once again, and if you have your Bibles, let's turn to Genesis chapter 34 and get started here. And I'd like to go ahead and read verses 13 through 31. The whiteboard says 29, but let's go ahead and just finish that out. Verses 13 through 31. And if somebody could get ready to do that, we'll read the text and then I'll make some comments. So we're all attempting to try to understand this story, and that's what our goal is here. So would someone begin reading at chapter 34, verse 13?
But Jacob's sons answered Shechem and his father Hamor with deceit, because he had defiled Dinah their sister. They said to them, "We cannot do this thing to give our sister to one who is uncircumcised, for that would be a disgrace to us. Only on this condition will we consent to you, if you become like us, and that every male of you be circumcised. Then we will give our daughters to you, and we will take your daughters for ourselves, and we will live with you and become one people. But if you will not listen to us to be circumcised, then we will take our daughter and go."
Their proposal seemed good to Hamor and his son Shechem. The young man, who was the most honored of all his father's family, lost no time in doing what they said, because he was delighted with Jacob's daughter. So Hamor and his son Shechem went into the gate of their city to speak to the men of their city. "These men are friendly towards us," they said. "Let them live in our land and trade in it. The land has plenty of room for them. We can marry their daughters and they can marry ours. If the men will agree to live with us as one people only on the condition that our males be circumcised, as they themselves are."
Won't their livestock, their property, and all our other animals become ours? So let us give our consent to them, and they won't settle among us. All the men who went out in the city gate agreed with Hamor and his sons, and every male in the city was circumcised. 3 days later, while all of them were still in pain, two of Jacob's sons, Simeon and Levi, Dinah's brother, took their swords and attacked the unsuspecting city, killing every male. And they put Hamor and his son Shechem to the sword and took Dinah from Shechem's house and left. The sons of Jacob came upon dead bodies and looted the city where their sister had been defiled.
They seized their flocks and herds and donkeys and everything else of theirs in the city and out in the fields. They carried off all their wealth and their children and women, and taking as plunder everything in the houses. Then Jacob said to Simeon and Levi, "You have brought trouble on me by making me a stench to the Canaanites and Perizzites, the people living in this land. We are few in number, and if they join forces against me and attack me, I and my household will be destroyed." But they replied, "Should he have treated our sister like a prostitute?"
Okay, alrighty. Good, thank you. And again, as I just stated a little bit ago, what I'm attempting to do here, along with you, is try to understand this story. These people are, quote, the people of God, but yet their actions are so contrary to how we think how the people of God should be reacting. We see deception, we see revenge and so forth motivated here and playing out in a disastrous tale, a disastrous story. So what I'm attempting to do is I'm taking the approach that I think these people, and I'm putting them in two groups: the brothers of Jacob, or the sons of Jacob, the brothers of Dinah rather, and the men of Shechem, in a framework of growth. I'm using the word growth. There's a framework of understanding, an operating, a view, a lens at which both parties are viewing the world. And that's why I've spent this time in developing this whole idea. Now, whether it's right, who knows, but it's my attempt to try to understand these bizarre actions of these people. So So I proposed to you last time, or actually 2 times ago, this whole idea, and this is review, that this idea of growth, and this is generally accepted among a broad, large group of people, as far as across a lot of different disciplines as far as human development. This is not new stuff. This is what is believed. That growth is a stage process. We know that intuitively true. We know the stage of a young child is different than the stage of a mature man, for instance. We are able, but that's physical growth. We're able to understand only one stage beyond. Now, I have really grappled with that. I accept it as true, and I've got an explanation for this in just a little bit. Because number 3 is also true, I think. The human tendency is to reject, ignore, or fight that which we don't understand. I think that's very true. I mean, it's true in my life. It's true in what I observe in people around me, that when judgment is made, it's boom, the door's shut, and there is not an openness to whatever that subject matter is. We tend to ignore those things or fight those things. Number 4. There's a wounding that must occur in order for us to move into a next stage of growth. And therein lies the truth, the practical truth of the gospel and Jesus' teaching about the grain of wheat and giving up our life. He who loses his life shall find it. He who finds his life shall lose it. I mean, that's reversed. But therein lies the truth that somehow through a wounding and loss experience, our eyes are opened and we are able to perceive at a different level. And I'm sure all of you have had, these types of experiences. Number 5 is the current stage where we are in our stage of growth is indicated by our ability to forgive and include the previous stages. And so that means what this implies, guys, is as we age, that the normal process of growth, or the implication here, is that we become more forgiving and more compassionate and more understanding. We doesn't mean we water down our beliefs, but we're able to put those into a larger context of understanding. So my model that I've created is a series of 7 concentric circles, and that's what I'm working on, each representing a stage of growth. And as we grow as individuals, we're expanding to the next, to the next circle, including that which is previous. So 1 is in the middle, and then 7. We looked at last week. We're going to work through the first 4. We've done 2. We're going to finish up with 4, and there's a reason for that. I don't think for this story we need to go on beyond 4, but into the last 3 stages. But for number 1, the center, and again to just review this idea that the circles are all gradiated in color from very light over here to very dark, because the area or the direction of growth is in this direction. There's a darkness that has to be confronted and worked through by faith to move into that next circle. There's our exit, and it's the little term threshold of fear, TOF, that there as we move towards growth in these circles, that fear wells up within us. And our natural tendency is to not move ahead. That requires faith to move out. Our natural tendency is to divert that and get back over here where it's protection, where we're protected and where we're safe. And so what happens for years and years and years, we'll be in a particular stage, and we'll just be circling inside the city. We think we may be growing, but our framework is still within the same context. We're just basically rearranging the furniture. We live in a sense of delusion and illusion that we come over here and it's just too scary. I can't let go. I can't do that. So then we come down here and we justify our position and say, by golly, I'm right, and the people I hang around with are right, and so then we live in this state of illusion, and then what comes when we come up to the top, and maybe at some point we get another opportunity to come down here. But see, we just circle inside here. Well, this first, and that's true of, in my mind, true of every stage. So number one is the stage of protection and pleasure. We talked about that's a very early and normal. These are all normal stages of growth. The young child, it's all about me and my body and my later as what I can acquire, and our culture is very much, advertising is very much directed to this level of protection and pleasure. What's in it for me? Well, that's a pretty low level of living. It's certainly fine for a young child, but when we get as a mature individual, it's pretty sad that we don't get beyond that. So number two is what I call the tribal two, and this moves from the individual, egocentric. This is still egocentric because it's about me. And this is where we find our identity in those we hang out with. And it becomes very important on what the group is saying. And that I measure myself in relation to what I see happening around me and what is being mirrored back to me by my group. In other words, if I'm in a particular church that I'm thinking of a story where particular church where you don't smoke cigarettes, and man, I've got a habit of smoking cigarettes, and I can't. I've tried to kick that, and I can't. But yet I value my relationship with these people. I'll do everything in the world to try to hide it that I'm smoking cigarettes. And whatever the case is. And so that is the beginning of the false self, is where we are taught as individuals to pretend in order to be accepted by the group. And that's a very important thing. Well, that's what we learned from Tribal 2. Now let's move on to 3. And this is what I'm calling breaking free. It's where we come to a realization and a sense of self-awareness to a point where, maybe the group has some flaws in it. And it's often reactionary, which is not, that's at the early stages, but we want to break away. This is really true with young men as they want to grow to a state of autonomy in their relationship with their parents. It's sometimes a very awkward time. They want to break away, but yet they want to be, they need the love and acceptance of the family. And it really plays it out in some interesting scenarios. Well, what's true there is also true as human beings. Many of you, well, I don't know many of you, some of you were at a young age involved in a church movement of some degree. A highly energetic church movement. And there are many people our age, I don't know about you, I don't know your individual story, but many people our age came to a realization that they'd been duped. They'd been duped by the organization. They'd been duped by very strong leadership within these ones they trusted. They were wounded. And there is a sense of breaking away out of, and sometimes it takes years to build trust again. And I have worked with people like this over the years, and it's very, very difficult for them to trust again. or to be engaged in any type of church context again. It's very difficult. People who were at once, as young people, very active in their faith and whatever that context was, to become engaged at a relational level back again. Well, that's this breaking away. Hopefully, as it heals, we can become comfortable. If number 2 is about finding our value within the context of our group, number 3 is about finding value in ourselves as an individual. And as a result, it becomes real difficult for these people to work with other people in a productive kind of way. The first 3 circles are all really egocentric, and it's about me. It's about me and my body. Circle 1, about me and my group. Number 2, and it's about me as an individual, and I have my rights, and I'll do it my way, kind of thing. The independence in 3. But in number 4, it starts to move. And this will be the last circle we look at. And this is where things start to look differently. And again, it's through a death process. This is the level in male initiation that the wisdom of the elders, they were to take the young men out and have a death type of an experience, an initiation of some degree, to introduce them to this, which I call stage 4. It's this contemplative, intuitive, being able to hold a degree of mystery and within balance. That is different than my way or the highway, this side or this side. They both can't be true. But guys, we're at the age where life is teaching us that there is a high degree of mystery out there. We have, probably most of us have learned to hold our tongue a little bit and withhold judgment because, there could be 2 sides to this story. And so that is the contemplative beginning, stage 4, and generally requires a large death that has to occur. Something's got, we get to a point where we just realize this is not working. How I'm viewing things is not working with me and my relationships. It's not working with me and my perception of reality in dealing with death and sickness. My little formulas for how I interpret truth in the scripture isn't working, and there's got to be something more. Now, some people, what happens is I just reject the whole thing, and there tends to be a reversion back to levels 1 and 2. Hey, I'm just going to chuck the whole thing and just go back to me, my way and the highway, my constructs. But to move ahead is to move into a really scary area, this level 4, where I can begin first steps towards accepting paradox, cautious beginnings to embrace intuitive knowledge, which at this level you start to think, gee, we've got scientific data, but we also have intuitive data. And how do we blend these two, or can they be? This step is starting to grapple with that whole idea. Open to listen. Rather than being the answer man, we become people who, gee, maybe we ought to listen here a little bit, and maybe we'll learn something new before we respond. So that's the 4 levels. It's me and my body is all that's important. My protection, my pleasure as a human being. That's stage 1. Stage 2 is it's me and my group, and how I find identity within that group and how it's mirroring back to me. Am I a, quote, good Christian? Guys, our churches are filled with this kind of thinking. It's our group or no group. Look at the Protestant denominations. That's level 2. That's level 2 thinking at an organizational level. Okay, and then level 3 is, no, it's not the church at all. I'm going to throw the church away. I'm going to go out and I'm going to become who I need to be, or who God has made me to be. But what is implied there, it's I don't need the group, but what it is a step. It's a step towards discovering who we really are in God. That it's not the group where I find my identity, but it's still at a stage where a death has to occur in order to move into, or a wounding needs to occur in order to move into this whole thing of, for the first time in my life, I'm able to hold, or at least explore the idea of holding two, it appears, opposing ideas, and I don't have to judge it right now. That's a huge step. So those four. So given that, this is how I think it works. for no charge for this. I'm going to blow this up here, and I'm going to get to the actual the two groups again, because I'm going to grade these two groups. This is where I'm going to go with this to try to explain why this is happening. This is where I'm going. But you have to understand all this background before we do it. So here's a blown up image of the seven concentric circles. And remember last week I had the four out of Luke 2:52, the four stages, the four aspects of growth. I think there are more, but we're going to take four. The C is the conscious level. This is the framework, the filter that we use to view reality. This is the conscious level. Jesus grew in awareness. It says he grew and in favor with God and men. I don't have that quite right, but that's what I'm calling the conscious level. It's our grid, our framework, our construct of understanding. And here, and let's say that in this case it's stage 2. Now, we as a man, we're physically grown, so we're off the chart. I mean, we're clear over, as far as our physical being, we're clear over here. You know, as far as fully and social and spiritually and relationally, we can interact. You know, we can be effective in business. We can be effective in a group of people. We can go to a party and we can interact, and we have a prayer life, and we go to church and we're active, and you know, we can function at high levels. But if our construct, our way of viewing reality is here, it's going to tend to suck these down to here. And guys, this is why we can see people that are mature, successful in many, many ways, and we hear them talk and we think, where in the world are you coming from? You know, and some of you are thinking of our political candidates. You know, where is your head? How can you think this? Whatever, you know, however we would do that. But this gives me understanding of why this is so. Because we can be very mature in our bodies. It's like the wisdom of Frankie Wright. It's okay to be a boy, but it's not okay to be a boy in a man's body. That is really, you know, that's got a lot of wisdom. And what that tends to do then is that in reality, you know, we should be moving all at one level, but this is this conscious view of reality is filtering everything. So actually, we can become a boy in a man's body. And I think that each of us have seen this type of thing happening. We can be spiritually, we can be very narrow in our thinking. Narrow in the sense, now you're thinking, gee, the road is broad to destruction, narrow is the gate. Well, there might be more than one way to look at that. Relationally, we keep shooting ourselves in the foot with relationships because we just don't have a latitude, you know, an ability to go beyond our safe context, our framework. And it really becomes limiting to who we can become as a human being. It's through the only way out. I mean, we could be a college professor, we could be a PhD, well advanced in whatever our area of expertise, but we could be functioning emotionally, and I don't have emotionally, but spiritually and relationally at a level 2, at a stage 2. And you know this is true. You know this is intuitively true. So it's my explanation of how to explain it. So we're dealing with grown men, all men in this story except for Dinah. This is grown men, and we see disastrous results. And so where would I cast these guys? Building this framework, here is where I'm going with this. Here is the text, and notice here, the red is what is true of the brothers of Jacob. The green represents Shechem. So I took the text and I lined up what was true with the brothers of Dinah and what was true in the text with the men of Shechem. So red is Jacob's family, green is Shechem. Jacob's sons answered Shechem and his father with deceit. So there's deceit. Yeah, I know you can't read it. Because he had defiled Dinah, their sister, they said to them, we cannot do this thing to give our sister to the one who is uncircumcised. And then, but, geez, I can't read this. But would be a disgrace to do it. And I can't read it here either. So it goes on. And what I did is I looked at what I saw as far as descriptive terms regarding each group. And then I voted to put them into one of, I came up with 4, because I see that the highest level operating here is stage 4. And I took each and I plotted them in where I think they are. And this is where I think they are. I think what's happening in this story is that the brothers of Jacob, or the sons of Jacob, brothers of Dinah, they're operating, even though they're mature men, they've had experience, they have a promise, they've been given a great amount, but they're operating functionally out of a stage 2. They're tribal people. They're thinking our way or the highway, that they've been given an amazing gift from God, but like the young man, as my example last week with a 16-year-old with a brand new Corvette Stingray, just does not know how, they do not know how to operate this piece of equipment. They do not know, they are not functionally aware to a point where they can function responsibly with this amazing promise that God has given them. That's my interpretation, guys. That's how I'm seeing it. And because they're tribal, in their thinking, tribal, our way or the highway, they go through this whole story and these disastrous results of murdering innocent people who have tried to comply with their demands, looting as thieves, going through the stuff after they kill them, and they end with this statement, guys. Should he treat our sister as a harlot? Where are you, from the moon? My goodness, I can't get it. And so, guys, this is what I've come up with. They are tribal 2, in all the negative sides, and they're attacking where I think the men of Shechem are, and they're at stage 4. And the reason I chose stage 4 instead of 3 is, how could they justify going through this painful experience of circumcision without some sort of ability to hold paradox? Do you see my reason? I think that is in a sense, a higher level. Now they saw payoff. They say, will not all of those things become ours? But I think we need to be careful to interpret that. I don't think they were out to, they saw power and security through the community and through what can be owned within the community. It's totally different, not the individualistic view that we hold as a culture. You know, in other words, they viewed themselves as a people would become stronger as a result. Ours being shared together in a community and in cooperation. So guys, right or wrong, this is my stab at this story, and I think we will move on next week. Thank you. Thank you for your patience. You guys have been great.
Thank you.
123, we'll move to next week.